Welcome to the Recluse's Cookbook. I'm your host, Vinnie McHale. The Recluse's Cookbook is a monthly podcast where I, your humble recluse, engage in one-on-one conversations with persons of substance. People who may not get the column inches in the media, but their work or life's events are remarkable. In the 2018 autobiography Beastie Boys book by Michael Diamond and Adam Horowitz, Horowitz, aka King Ed Rock, dedicates a chapter on certain people and how when they enter your life they change it. The journey you were on stops and it goes off on a completely different tangent that leads you to places that you never thought were possible of reaching. For me, my first guest is one of those people. Tom Quain is a documentary maker, writer, director, and animator. I first met him in January 2015 when he was recruiting for his first feature film, I'm Talking to You. He invited me to join his merry band of filmmakers, and with it, I was introduced to an incredible network of people. From there I embarked on a creative streak that I had never experienced before, and all the while Tom has been stood in the wings encouraging me every step of the way. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Tom Quain. So I suppose we start at the beginning. So I met you, it was January 2015, and you were auditioning for your film, I'm Talking to You. So where did I'm Talking to You come out of?
I'm Talking to You came out of just a very strong desire to make a feature film. And it was less about, wow, I have this great idea. I can't do it as a play. I can't do it as a short film. I can't do it as whatever. It came out of from the very expressed desire of banging my head against the wall for a couple of years saying, gee, I want to make a feature film. I want to make a feature film. I want to make a feature film. And if you do that for long enough, and if you bang your head against the wall for long enough, a couple of ideas will pop out. And that was an idea I'd had for a while, actually. The idea, what it's about is I'm Talking to You is a feature film about two guards on the motorway in Ireland who work on the M50. And one of them, the younger guard, called, his name is Mark, discovers a pirate propaganda radio station. And it kind of caused him to question his black and white, his view of the world. And that was kind of the idea of the radio. Was an idea I'd had for a while. I'd had it since I was in college in Galway studying film and TV. I think anyone who studies film and TV, they always have that desire to make a feature film. And I had just never put it in a short film for whatever reason. I never really gotten the story structure or maybe the characters in place. And carrying that idea along for a few years from 2010 when I finished college, 2015 when I began production on the film, as you say, I really, I carried that idea of the propaganda, the radio forward in various shapes and forms. It was about a lot of different things. And only really in 2014 did I finally begin to put the plot together. And as you know yourself, the film went on quite a long journey. So certainly in January 2015, even though we were beginning casting, as you say, it certainly wasn't the end of the script process, but it was the beginning of the film process. And film and script happened very much concurrently on that film, even though I should say we did have a script when we began.
How did you go about putting together that team of people? Because that was quite a unique combination.
So we made a film by Zoe Kavanagh in 2014. You have to to understand I'm Talking to You in 2015, you have to go back a year to 2014. And I worked as an AD on Zoe Kavanagh's movie called Taron Barker. And Taron Barker, The Demon Hunter, is a film where I was on that. And we basically took all the crew from that. And I was kind of cheeky. I kind of went onto that knowing I wanted to make a movie in 2015. I was like, fucking hell, I don't fucking know anybody, who, I knew people in Dublin because we made it all in Dublin. I only really moved to Dublin, and to make a feature film, which is much more sprawling and much more chaotic, you need a team, who are willing to go all the way with you. So I kind of said, I fucking need to, I need to go and to meet some people, because I can't go and do this thing all on my own. So on Zoe's movie, Taron Barker, that was produced by Constant Motion Pictures by Victor and Anna, and Victor and Anna did a great job on that. And a lot of the people, we carried them over into I'm Talking to You. And there was just, I think on that movie, which was a lot bigger than I'm Talking to You and a lot less guerrilla style, I think I'm responsible for introducing that element of the guerrilla filmmaking. Taryn Barker was a lot more organized. Sarah, who was the AD, did a great job on that. But we lifted, I would say, 90%. Anyone who wanted to come on from a Demon Hunter came on to I'm Talking to You. And I think virtually everyone did, So we really rolled that crew into this film. And so once that had wrapped in basically December 2014, as you say, we started casting in January. So we would have done the locations from February, and we were originally shooting in March. I think we might have even shot some stuff in March, and then the real shoot would start in January. So we pushed that crew all just from that film into mine, and they all did a fantastic job. Victor and Anna, who produced it, the film I'm Talking to You was produced under Constant Motion Pictures, and they did a fucking great job. Like, as you say, it was a very guerrilla filmmaking, and to produce that film, it took a lot of, like, what's the word? It took a lot of, they were just, willing to get stuck in, and, you need people who are willing to get stuck in. And you say they're professional. I don't really know how professional we were, but we were certainly enthusiastic, and maybe that kind of makes up for any professionalism. But we certainly had a pretty clear idea of what we wanted to do, and that kind of imbued everyone with a certain level of determination and enthusiasm about the project, I think, and the fact that everyone loved working on Zoe's movie, and there was a lot of enthusiasm and love on that film, kind of gave everyone a really positive vibe to work on mine, because it was really the continuation of of what became a family. Every film crew is a family, so it was just an excuse, I think, to keep the party on for that little bit, longer.
Like, when I look at I'm Talking to You, I see a real knowledge of film on your behalf. It was very clear it was made by someone who has a very vast knowledge and love of cinema. What were the influences or what were you watching maybe at the time or in the lead up to I'm Talking to You? Or was there anything in particular, or were you just watching everything and anything?
Anything and anything. Like, the film was driven by, a desperation. I was desperate to make a feature film. I really said, like, I was like, at this stage, I was 5 years out of film school, and I was like, this just isn't fucking on. I haven't made a feature film. And so it really was anything and anything. And the film really, I think a lot of the influences are pretty obvious. There's like a very French New Wave sequence in there. There's a very much handheld Paul Greengrass kind of style towards the end. There's some just some real classic, some Bergman scenes, two characters really just having a dialogue between each other. And I think all those influences probably was not a good combination on the film, because the film, is going in so, if you go and see the film, and I should say the film is available to watch on Amazon, but if you go and watch the film, you can really see the film is a mishmash of so many different styles, and it's going in so many different, it's going left, it's going towards the right, and that maybe wasn't such a good thing, but that kind of way of it going in so many different ways came just really from a desire to make a film, and not having the patience to make, say, 5 films, where you had the one which was a Godard film, and one which was Bergman, and one made in the style of Greengrass. It was just saying, no, I've no time to do those. I'm just going to make one big film. I'm going to put in all my favorite elements of those, which was, the talking to camera of Godard, the really intense character-driven scenes of Bergman, and the kind of chaotic, the realism of Paul Greengrass. And those are probably, the main kind of influences in the film. And those styles, I think, are very clear. But the film is fucking chaotic. And even when you're watching it, it is fucking chaotic. And I love it. I'm really glad we made it. But and the making of it was chaotic as well. Definitely the making of it was chaotic as well. But those would be the main styles and the influences of it, And all those styles and influences were driven just by a desire to, get to be just, pulling the foot out and make a feature film, you know what I mean? Because I really fucking had it up to here. And I just thought, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So let's just get fucking stuck in with making a film. And, you know, who cares how chaotic it is or how mad it is? Let's just go and make it, because I had because I knew I had the passion for it. I knew I was stubborn enough to finish it. I knew I was determined enough to make it, you know, and that I knew once I said I was going to do it, I would go and follow through in it. So
You've hit upon something that I kind of picked up on, was that you said about how fed up you were and how you wanted to make a feature film. But at the time, and this is actually related and shown on screen in the film, it really kind of mirrors Irish society at that particular time too, where people were fed up of an austere lifestyle that was forced upon them. You know, your film depicts a riot at the end of it. It depicts a politician who claims to be for the good of the people. And, you know, it depicts finally, say, the protagonist, Mark, a young guy who, the best of notions, he's new to his career. And like anyone new in a career, they want to do their best. But they find that the system itself really grinds them down and prevents them from doing it. How did that idea come in?
well, like I was saying, I had the idea of the pirate propaganda, the radio, for a while. And as I was finishing up college, I don't know, people who are old enough to, recall now, but when the economy crashed in 2009, I was like, oh, this is kind of interesting. This might be an appropriate a vehicle to work this plot line into of the radio, and combine that with the economy crashing and the recession that came for the next whatever 5 years. And that was kind of how that came by. And I think I'm someone who I mentioned what's going on around me. I mean, I made a lot of documentaries in that time. There was a protest on Dame Street. I don't know if you remember this, but there was
Yeah.
an Occupy thing on Dame Street, and I filmed down there for a week of that. And I filmed a lot of the protests when Brian Cowan was kind of being pushed out of government, and when Fianna Fáil were kind of being pushed out of government in 2010. And so I was kind of aware of what was going on around me. And I also had this kind of film idea. So I was combining these things. And like in that film, in like there's a documentary I made that's on my YouTube. There's lots of dialogue in that I took out of that documentary, of protesters talking, like as I was saying, there's a French protester in I'm Talking to You, and a lot of her dialogue is lifted from that thing I made in 2011. There's a scene actually where this French protester is talking to these two Irish guys, and he literally says the exact same lines in the film. I was like thinking in the back of my head, this is really, this is funny. He was explaining the ideas of France, and the idea of liberty is a word that came from the bourgeoisie, that it came from the ruling class. And he was explaining to these guys who were wearing kind of just normal Irish guys, and these guys didn't have a fucking clue what he was talking about, basically. And I was filming it as that conversation was happening. I was thinking, this is fucking funny. And that kind of got put away in the back of the brain. And so there was a lot of little moments like that during that period of kind of political upheaval, or whatever you want to call it, from 2009 to 2014, which was a period of upheaval, because Fianna Fáil was the dominant party for so much of that period, and they'd become the main party. There was that change that happened in that period of Irish people were kind of opening their eyes a bit to a new way of looking, that it wasn't just all about the idea of cash, which it had become towards the end of the Celtic Tiger, people buying houses in Bulgaria, whatever, crazy things like this. But so I'm someone who was kind of looking around at what was going on. I wasn't just a filmmaker with my head in the sand. And so a lot of little moments like that, be it the protests, be it the Occupy thing on Dame Street, little conversations, and there's lots of things which weren't even filmed, which I saw, or which I overheard, and which I stored in the back of the head. And so the film came out of that period. Like, I think any film or filmmaker is influenced by, to some degree, of what goes on around them, be it the people, the events, or the times they're living in. And certainly if you make a political film, which it is, you know, it is relatively political, I think, or it's certainly about politics. I mean, that's kind of an interesting question, whether it is a political film. It certainly touches heavily on politics, and that's a major plot point. And you know, it's just it's in a way, it's just a cheap way of when you can't come up with a story, you know, when you're stuck at home and you're thinking like, fucking hell, how am I going to come up with a script? You know, because like I was saying, I was eager to make a feature film. How am I going to go and come up with a script, you know, when I've used so many of my ideas on these plays? You know, I didn't really have a lot of ideas. And so sometimes you just have to open the paper. And I guess I was fortunate or unfortunate, depending on your opinion of the film, that at the time I opened the paper, there was a lot going on. And I just took a lot from that in terms of the, you know, what I viewed as corrupt, the politicians or whatever.
2020 saw the Irish general election, and with it the release of Tom's latest documentary, Everything You Needed to Know About the 2020 Irish General Election. This project marked the latest instalment in his documentary series that covered the days of the Irish general election. 10 years ago saw the release of the first documentary called Conversations from a Polling Station. In 2016 it was followed up with Marking the Score. Tom discusses the documentary series here. What I didn't know about you at the start, when I first met you in January 2015, you'd already released a short documentary on the 2011 general election called Conversations from a Polling Station. And what no one knew, I suppose, was that you got it into your mind come 2016, when the next general election happened, that you went up and you followed it up with another short documentary. Who, what, where, and when, I suppose, is the best way to pose that question.
Fucking hell, yeah. It's a good question. Well, I mean, I'd done a lot, you know. I mean, just before that, you know, I'd done a documentary on Rebecca Collins, a musician. And I was touring with her. So I just done that in 2014. I'd done a lot of short films. But the documentary of Conversations from a Polling Station really just, it was just, you know, and then subsequently the 2016 one, you know, what was that called again? What did I call the 2016 one?
Marking Up the Score.
Oh yeah, Marking Up the Score, yeah. They were just made from a desire, you know, a kind of, you know, restless desire not to be standing around waiting for something else to happen, you know. In terms of the 2011 one, I don't know why I made that. I've no idea, man. I've fucking no idea why I made that. I can only think it must have had something to do with the fact that because I had never made a documentary until just before then, in 2010, or the end of 2010, the beginning of 2011. We made a documentary called Conversations from a Projection Booth. And I can only think that those two things are kind of intertied, because obviously they have similar titles. And Conversations from a Projection Booth was just a documentary I was asked to make in Galway about a film projectionist there, Freddie, who was just about to retire. And I'd never made a documentary before that. And I was just, you know, I just graduated and I was kind of hanging around in Galway. I was thinking like, fucking, I'll make it. Sure, what else am I at? You know, walking around in circles in Eyre Square. So I made that, and I just finished that, I guess, at the start of 2011. And I guess when the election happened in February 2011, a month later, I can only imagine I just said, oh, I'll make another one. You know what I mean? And I'll harass some different people. And you know, that's my only perception of why I must have made that.
It was an intriguing idea to go back to a polling station and take the locals. Where did that concept come up from?
I don't think it is that intriguing, is it?
Let's just say I haven't heard of anyone else doing it, and certainly not to catch.
True, yeah.
That particular time, Tom, as well, that 2011, it was like, I remember that particular general election because it was the first time that we had a break from Fianna Fáil, you could say, in a sense. They had like a good long, where the country had got very rich, and then all of a sudden it was in the shit. And the the 2011 one just seemed to kind of be one of these kind of moments in Irish political history that kind of, at the time we all thought it might mean something, but it didn't really amount to much. But it was just an interesting idea to go back to your locale and speak to the local people who it was just a very different way of approaching something that we have seen before. Like, I mean, you always get the news crews running in and out of poll stations, but you never get a local filmmaker going up to his own saying, well, why are you voting and who are you voting for?
Yeah, I think you've touched on it there. I think it was because of the political crisis at the time, which, like you say, was big at the time, but now it's like, who cares? So I think that must have been it. I think I must have thought at the time, yeah, this is kind of an interesting election. And I think because a lot of people really enjoyed the previous film we made of Freddie, the previous documentary we made, I think I must have thought like, okay, this is a good thing now, so I'll make another one. And maybe I was looking around seeing what else I could make in terms of documentary. And yeah, like you say, because there was that perception of a significance in that election at the time, maybe I thought, oh, I'll document this. And it's true, yeah, like you say, you get kind of the RT quite professional interviews, but maybe because I was a bit more known to them, A, they were willing to talk to me, and B, they were more willing to say things which they might not have been willing to say to an RT crew. Not that anyone said anything crazy,
But
but
they
it
were
was
honest. They
they
were
were
honest,
honest, yeah.
very
And
honest.
I think in your faces, in their faces, you can see the shock at what's happened. You can still see the, oh my God, we're broke. We thought we were all rich. We're stunned. I think there is a real honesty in their emotions, in that the fact that they really are stunned.
There was one particular woman who had lost her pension, was or not?
Oh yeah, that was heart wrenching to hear. Yeah, she'd lost her pension and she wasn't able to go and travel. And yeah, think about that now. I think I put some of those lines again, and I'm talking to you. I don't think they made the finished film, but I think the film of I'm talking to you climaxes in a supermarket. And I think at one stage someone had actually, yeah, there is in the finished film. Those lines are in the finished film, and they're said by Orla, one of the actresses who have Orla and Hugh, who appear at the very beginning with the faked baby, and they appear at the end. And Orla says in that scene, I lost my money, we can't go on holidays. And yeah, actually, I took those lines from her and I gave them to Orla. I'd completely forgotten that. You're right there. So it's another example of how I took some of the documentary lines based in reality and brought them into the fictional space to kind of lend some credibility to the madness that was that film.
And then you followed it up, of course, in 2016 with marking up the score, which it was again, it was a follow-on to what you had previously done, but again, it took up a completely different style. But it was set, and also too, it was set in Dublin. You'd obviously moved to Dublin at that particular point. What made you want to follow it up? Was there a significant change, say, in the previous 5 years that made you think, oh well, let's go again and see what happens? Or
I
because
think I think after I had made that in 2011, I just made it over a 2-day period where I interviewed the people in the polling station, and then I went to the count center, which was in City Hall at the time. And so that was kind of fine. It was a 2-day thing, made it, shot, and I probably edited it then on the third afternoon of filming, and I just said, gee, okay, that was fun. I made it, I put it out there. But I think I always thought at the back of my head, well, I could have done more with that. I could have talked to more people and gone to another kind of a level. And so, when the opportunity came along in 2016, I guess it was February 2016, I guess we had just shot some, if not all, of I'm Talking to You. I'd imagine we were in the middle of I'm Talking to You at that stage. We were doing more pickups, probably around the same time, actually, in February or in January. I think we did more pickups of I'm Talking to You. So many of these projects are happening, concurrently in one shape or form, in one shape or another. And yeah, so when the opportunity came along, I think I just finished. I was working on a TV series with RT. We just finished, and I said, okay, well, look, I've got a couple of weeks off here. Let's try and do more of what I might have wanted to do in 2011, but I maybe wasn't, you know, brazen enough to do in terms of just walking up to people and asking them questions. And so I did a bit more of that in 2016. I went to a press conference of Sinn Féin. I just walked in there. I pretended I couldn't find my press badge. I had my camera. I just walked past them and said, "Oh, I don't know." I was moving my hands around the pockets, trying to pretend I had the badge somewhere, but I was waved in. Whilst I talked to a Fine Gael woman called Kate O'Connell, who's lost her seat then, even though in 2016 she gained her seat, but she lost it then in 2020. And I emailed a lot of people. I think what I realized I was lacking in 2011 maybe was some of the politicians' point of view. And so I emailed and Facebooked a lot of politicians, because that is the one time of the year that they will actually answer you. And so Kate O'Connell got back to me. So I interviewed her in Rathgar, and she was fine. I wasn't really brazen enough to ask really any hard questions, but I asked a few questions, and it was more for the experience of doing it rather than anything else. And I'm trying to think what else is in that documentary. And again, I went back to the same primary school in Glentown, and I went to the Count Centre, which I think again was in City Hall that year. Only in 2020 did it move to the sports hall. And I think it's the main difference is it's twice as long. It's fucking long, and it's probably too fucking, it's probably overly, if I'm honest, it's too long. It's like 27 minutes long, and I don't know really what I was thinking, except that I probably shot a lot of material, and I probably should have edited it down. I edited it down and I didn't, but it was just it was another thing to make really at the time. And in terms of the timing, there was a lot of other stuff I wanted to make, and maybe just the timing didn't come together in the way that did on this documentary. And so it was fun. And the fact that I wasn't happy with what I did in 2011, so I could go back and improve it, is the big thing. I think with any project you do, the first time you go and do it, you'll screw up some stuff, because that's just the way it is. If you do anything the first time, whether you're an engineer or a carpenter, or a furniture maker, or a fireplace installer, I'm just looking here, you'll kind of make a balls of it the first time. And I don't think I made a balls of it, but I think you'll always find things to improve. And that's what I did in that 2016 documentary. I just improved on what I did in 2011. I don't think it's that good. I think it's quite flawed, but it doesn't really have any shape. But it was interesting anyway.
And then you finalize it all with the last one in 2020, the last installment, everything you wanted to know about the 2020 Irish general election. Now, that's 9 years from the original release. There was a massive change in the Irish political landscape in that time that I don't think anyone saw coming. Did you pick up on it, say, at any point over the years of filming, that, oh, we could actually go in this direction? Or
and 2020, yeah, then no. I mean, no one knew what would happen. That's an interesting documentary, because it was less about the election. I mean, it was, but some of the issues were so, they were made a big deal of it out at the time, but now here we are, only 6 months after the election, no one's even brought them up again. Like the idea of the pension age being raised, like that was a massive issue at the time, but that hasn't been brought up hardly since then. Homelessness was a massive issue, but that's gotten kind of forgotten about. And the reason, of course, all of these
got nothing to do with a pandemic. No, it's got nothing to do with a pandemic. No,
got everything to do with the pandemic. Yeah, but I think the interesting thing about that documentary is because it was made literally in the end of February 2020, and obviously March 2020 everything changed with the COVID. So and it's funny to watch people in February 2020. They're all in groups, they're shaking hands. There's a big climax at the end when we're in the Count Centre.
Yeah,
and there must be 500 people in there. I mean, there must have been COVID in that scene. Do you know what I mean? And I remember even saying to my father, because he went over with us on the day to the Count Centre, and I remember saying to him on the way, God, there isn't anyone who's too concerned about the idea of the coronavirus in there. And we were kind of saying, we were laughing it off, and that was, February, like the voting was February 8th, so that must have been February the 9th or the 10th or something. And the funny thing is, I cut out even someone talking about the coronavirus, like the one line, which was so relevant. I was like, and it was the last thing I cut. And the guy, he's very, very cleverly says, and this was again on the day of the vote, which was February 8th, and he says February the 8th, just shows how smart the people at Cork are. He says on February the 8th, I think the coronavirus is going to affect the economy for some time to come. And I was like, whatever. I mean, I was someone who grew up hearing a lot about the swine flu, the bird flu, and SARS, and those things never really had an impact on me or on us. I was like, I was thinking like, I'll put it in the documentary because it'll be an interesting thing, which people will have forgotten about a couple of months from now. But I cut it out then, and I think the following week, everything went crazy. So that's like a funny outtake.
So where do you think?
I even asked him, he says, I think the virus is going to affect things. And I say, what virus? So I spared myself the embarrassment by cutting out that line. No, I just cut it out because I didn't think it would be a thing. Because it was so long, it was half-hour long. I was saying, I'll just shave a couple of seconds off it here, something irrelevant.
That's probably the most relevant thing, isn't it?
Oh, totally the most relevant thing. It's the only 5 seconds of thing which in the whole thing.
In between jobs, Tom found himself working in an off-license to make ends meet. His experiences there sowed a seed that blossomed into his first animated series, Poxy Bleeding Shop. You're an animator as well. You released a animation series called Poxy Bleeding Shop in 2018.
Yeah.
And you're currently making the second series. Before that, before you even made a movie or made a documentary, you had a small little short. It's Irish. And tell us about that. That was one that I didn't know until I went looking at your YouTube channel.
Ima Lesh Ongwe, the Irish version of Gone with the Wind. That was made when I was in college, and I literally, for the life of me, I've no memory why I made that. I cannot think what made me want to make that. Actually, I mean, it was made. It was we had to make storyboards. In film school, one of these things, you have to fucking learn how to make storyboards. And I came up with this little story of it's about a woman putting her washing out and the clothes blew away. And the teacher said to me, yeah, it's cool. You ought to go and film that. So I was thinking like, well, fuck, I can't really go and film it because, the story is about the clothes blowing up in the wind and they do a bit of a dance and a bit of a circle. I was like, can't really be at that. So I kind of forgot about it, I think. And I think I bumped into someone else called Edith Peeperoff, and she's an animator in Galway. And I was just chatting to her one night, and I was telling her about this thing, and she was saying, "Oh, you should do an animation." I was like, "Animation? What do you mean animation?" And she was like, "Yeah, this would be fantastic in animation." She was describing how you could do it and do all the drawings. She was like, yeah. And I was like, no, I can't be fucking at that. Way too fucking long. I've other stuff I have to be doing. Though in Galway, what else is there to be doing but going out, in clubs when you're in college and, and boozing it up and doing whatever else. But eventually, yeah, I guess she must have talked me into it. And, it's the kind of thing which I couldn't do now because I was in college full time. I was working even more full time. And I would just do it when I came home from work, from Extravision. And so I would animate. Basically, we finished at midnight. And so I'd animate from, 1 a.m. to 4 a.m. every night. And, when you're 21, you can do that kind of stuff. And then you're up in the morning at 7 a.m.
Yeah.
And so that's just how that got made. And that was all hand-drawn, very roughly. I just, I got animation paper. I bought some. I got the little thing that you hang the animation paper on. And it was made so crudely. I sellotaped those pages onto the television when I was photographing them and just moved them around drawing to drawing. And it's very crude, but it was kind of added to the charm of it, you might say. there's no other industry where you can do something really crudely and people say it'll add to the charm except for art. But people always say that about that. It's quite charming because it's quite, rough, and the drawing. And so yeah, so I kind of forgot about that then. And until I did Poxy Bleeding Shop in 2018, as you say, yeah.
I had no idea that you had done animation until you brought it up. I think we were sitting in Shin A, and you told me how you were working in an off license at the time, and you had this idea for that set an off license.
And was that before I'd made it, was it? Or
Yeah, it was before 12, just before you headed off to Cardiff.
I was working in an off license, and it really was a fucking dreadful job. It was a fucking dreadful job. But I'm someone who can always see the funny side of things. And there was a lot of funny fucking stuff that went on in there. And I was part of a lot of it, you know what I mean? I'm gonna hold my hand up and not pretend I was so innocent and everything that went on there. But I kind of knew at the time, again, being someone who's looking at what's going on around me, going, this is a really, fucked up situation with people coming in balaclavas and knives, coming in stealing the shop and holding us all up and chasing us around the shop and fucking swearing at us and, doing all these crazy things on drugs and strip teasing outside the shop. And I was like thinking, this is the most fucking ridiculous fucking thing. I can't believe I'm in this, a situation like this. But I just again seen, okay, but maybe Tom, you can see a positive side of this, that if you take some of this and again try and make a film of it. And I probably thought about doing it as a live action piece, but to do that live action, you obviously need a pub or an off license, sorry, and you need to then to rent it out. You mean maybe pay for it. And I was just like, no, fuck, can't be at that. Too much effort, and then you're filming all the glasses and the amount of drink, and you can't be filming the labels. So I was like, nah, that wouldn't really kind of work. But the characters were so rich that they stayed with me almost more than the scenario of the off license, which did kind of tie it all together. But the characters I really loved. And so when I was there, just to stop myself from going fucking insane, I'd print out the receipts a lot, and I'd write down a lot of what the characters said, because the dialogue was so rich, that I'd write down. I was thinking, this dialogue is too good to waste. And I kind of drew. I'm not really a great drawer or anything, but I drew a lot of the costumes as well, because you kind of have to think about that thing. And so gradually, bit by bit, I had kind of a lot of this artwork built up. And I was kind of in Dublin. I was just fucking sick of Dublin. And so yeah, so I went away and did animation for a year, and I kind of brought these notes over with me, just in a little bag. I just had these things, and I'm sure people in Wales thought I was nuts, opening up the bag, and there was loads of these customers and lines and dialogue and costumes things on the back of receipts. But just yeah, out of that anyway, Poxy Bleeding Shop season 1 was made, and I don't know. I mean, it's very rough season 1, but it's entertaining, I think.
I remember watching the first series of it and kind of going, I know that. I know those people in some shape or form. You clicked in there nicely with the kinds of people that they'd be going into off license in rough areas, you
Okay,
know.
cool. Well, all the people, they're all based on real people. Every single person in that first series, anyway, is a real person, and some of the dialogue is verbatim in the first season, and it's very much. There's no real story in the first season. It's literally just characters coming in, buying stuff, and leaving. There's no story. There's no narrative. There's no overarching plot in any real sense. It's very much me just putting my toe in the water and just thinking, saying, okay, let's just see how much of this will work. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think having that foundation of realism, I was able to kind of figure out my own animation style on top of that.
Decided to go and do a postgraduate in animation in Cardiff. And you went
Yeah.
with the idea of Poxy Bleeding Shop to Cardiff.
Um, well, I was kind of in Dublin, and I'd done a lot of TV series. I worked on Bridge and Eamon, on Damon Ivor. I'd worked on a few films like The Flag, Handsome Devil, and a few of these other things. And just as a production assistant and a location assistant, and I'd gone to Galway just That's the summer before that, working on Klondike, and I was the locations person on that, and I was like thinking, this isn't really what I want to do. You know, I really want to get back to telling my own stories. And so I just think to myself, and at the same time I was finishing off the documentary of the general election 2016. I was still finishing off I'm Talking to You in 2016, 2017. And so I really thinking I really need to just focus here and figure out what I want to do, because I could spend a lot of all the rest of my life I wanted to just on those TV series doing stuff for other people, but I really want to develop my own material. I don't know why, probably just some ego trip, but I think like, okay, I need some time out of Dublin. And at that time, the rent was going up very quickly. The economy was kind of booming again, 2016. And a lot of places like Block T in Dublin were being closed down, and Bulldoze, in fact, which was an art, a place for artists to go. It was one of those things like Block T and Temple Bar before it, where the artists had come in, they had made it kind of a cool space to come in and hang out. And then when the economy around it had kind of come up after the kind of crash, the artists were the first ones to go. So I kind of saw that happening in 2016, and I was like thinking, well, all this is happening, and I'll get out for a year and see what happens. So yeah, 2017, I went away and made that. And I had all those notes, and I was thinking, well, if I go do this animation thing, at least I'm not just going over with, you know, no idea, which I wouldn't have liked. I was going over there with an idea of what I wanted to do.
And how many people were over there with you that had the similar idea, like, oh, well, I have something here in my mind? Or was it just yourself, or was it everybody?
Um, I think I was the only one. Like what I went on was, it was a master's. And so a lot of people who were on the course with me had done a 3-year a degree, and they were just doing the master's. It was essentially a 4th year for them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, so a lot of them, you know, knew each other as well. So I was, you know, coming in here from Ireland, this fucking, you know, nutcase who was talking about working in off licenses and, you know, alcoholics and drug addicts. So I don't know what they really thought of me, but we all got on, you know, fairly well. We were all really cool, and I think it was good though, because, you know, sometimes if you put yourself in that scenario, but you don't have an idea, you can just get carried away with the idea of being in college. Because when you're in college, there's always stuff to be doing, whether it's going out, having some pints, or working on other people's projects, or it's, you know, just chatting and hanging out in the canteen. And so I think having that idea, coming over there with that idea was good for me, because I was very focused.
But you did a lot of work under your belt too by the time you got over there.
Oh, I was a nut job, man.
You made your movie, you were a documentarian, you arrived over there with a hell of a lot of working experience compared to, say, whoever else was there, I reckon. And you were very focused on the job.
I was very focused. Yeah, I was very focused. Yeah. I
Probably the
mean,
most focused you've ever been.
I probably was. I mean, when you go over there, you don't have any friends originally. You don't know anyone. So by coincidence, you will just kind of focus on the work for the first couple of months. And I had to learn computer animation because Imha Leis an Gwaith was hand drawn, as I said. So this was all computer animation. So you know, I spent, you know, I guess probably September, October, you know, November, just really, you know, doing my own thing, focusing on learning the program. But you know, I had a strong background, but not in animation. Like everyone else's animation was obviously far stronger than mine, because they had been doing it for 3 years. But I think maybe the one advantage I had of them was my characters were maybe stronger than theirs.
Right.
And I
Okay.
think if
Yeah.
you have strong characters in any project, that'll carry you a long way.
Yeah. That's
And
true.
comedy,
Actually.
we had the comedy as well, you know.
Yeah. So, like, compared, like, what was everyone else doing? Was it very within their own bubble, or was there anyone else there kind of stepping out, or is there anyone else since that's released anything that?
Um, well, they've all done kind of fantastic stuff. I think maybe possibly the difference, without speaking for, you know, about things now, I don't know, because that was 3 years ago and people have done different things. But certainly at the time, I kind of wanted to produce my own work. while others were maybe more focused on, once they left college, just getting a career,
Right.
which was understandable. Obviously, I had been around the block at that stage. I'd done a lot of jobs, but from their point of view, they'd been in school for so long that they just wanted to get a job. So they're working on, there's a lot of animation companies in Cardiff and the surrounding area of Wales. So they're working on that, but they're working as part of a team, on a project, which is great. I mean, the animation is amazing. I mean, gee, I wish the animation I could do would be as good as what all of them do. And so some people are just focusing on storyboards. Some people are focusing more on backgrounds. Some people are focusing, more on gaming and doing more stuff in that area. But it was good. Like, a lot of people want to do a lot of different things, so it was good to meet all those people. It was good that everyone else wanted to do different things, because if we were all like me, it would have been an absolute head case for our teachers, I think.
You're in the middle of production, or post-production, should I say?
No, it's production, yeah.
Production of the second series of Poxy Bleeding Shop. What's changed about it, say, compared to the first series to this series? What's new?
I think what I've realized just in talking to you there in the last whatever hour or whatever is that I think when I do something, like, if I'm not happy with it, and if I'm able to, I'll try and improve it. You know what I mean? So, like the election documentary I made in 2011, it was fine, but I knew I could improve it, so I did in 2016, and I improved it again in 2020. In terms of I got better cameras, better gear, talked to more people, and the editing and music on point by the time it finally came 10 years after I left film school. But same just with the animation. So when I made that series in 2018, I think when you're producing art independently, you have to just be willing to, you just have to be willing to go and make it, and B, you have to be willing to put it out there, and C, you have to be willing then to move on. You're doing this independently. There's only X amount of money. There's only X amount of time. And so whatever, I made season 1, finished in 2018, but I was kind of always aware, I think anyone was aware who saw it, that there was a lot of room for improvement. Just fucking, by the time it came, I'm trying to think like why or when, at what point did I decide I would do season 2? I think I knew I would always do a second season, and just I had so much material that really had built up that I knew if I spent a couple of months just on the scripts, I would be able to make a second series out of that material. So I did, and by the time I finished those scripts, I was back in Dublin by this stage, from Wales. So it must have been in or around the summer of 2019 that I finished those scripts, I guess. So I started doing the writing then around summer 2019, or I finished it around 2019, I guess. In around then, September, October, November, I started doing tests again. And, it's come out as a good kind of thing, because, 2020 obviously has been a year for, doing your own personal kind of projects. Like, it's been the perfect to be working on in 20. Like if I tried to start a feature film in September 2019, or a little bit afterwards, I guess, because it took 3 years to 20 took 3 years to, I'm talking to you. So if we had started a feature film in September 2019, we would have just been absolutely screwed. Do you know what I mean? Whoever was on that film, along with me. So the fact that I just, by coincidence, happened to have this series all ready to go, and I lost my job like a lot of people did in March 2020. And I was like, oh no, I've lost my job. This is a nightmare. And then I realized I was on furlough. I was being paid to sit home. So I very quickly went from being the worst thing ever to the fucking, greatest thing ever. And so, yeah, so then really in March 2020, I just fucking dived in. Because in January 2020, I'd done a lot of filming, which was lucky, I didn't have the time anyway, but just, it's been a real, a blessing that I've just had all this time to work. Like from March 2020 to August 2020, I didn't have a job. I just sat at home and animated. Like, I've got my little book here beside me, and I'll just open it now on a random page. And just every day, here's a random page between March and August, animate every year. Now I'm still animating, but this is when the bulk of the work was done. So achieved today on the 5th of the 5th, 2020. So that's the 5th of May, 2020. So created After Effects, letter to the Irish Times. There's a scene where someone goes and writes letter to Irish Times. I replaced Emily's close-up. I replaced Tom's close-up. I wrote and recorded some dialogue. I improved the wide shot exterior. God knows what episode this is. There's 7 episodes now in this series. I don't know what episode this is. I improved evil shot of the boss, and I added some wine, and I added some shadows to the wine and the beer. Fucking another date now. Done today, 5th of 7th, so the 5th of July. So episode 5, Liam mid blink and corrected the phone booth, the colors of the phone booth. Corrected some color on the spy van, copied episode 1 2-shot into episode 5, fixed manager on Liam over the shot. So it's that kind of stuff which has been done from March to now, basically, and it's in really good shape, the new series.
Finally, I asked that question I want to ask all people who devote themselves to their craft. What makes you do it?
Well, it's habit, you know. Look, I've been making films literally ever since I was a kid. Like, I have video cassettes, like fucking video cassettes. I have video cassettes this big. I have high 8 tapes this big. I've DSLR, not DSLR tapes. What are they called? Little smaller tapes. I forget what they're called. This size.
DV?
And now I've cards. What?
DV tapes?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, mini DV tapes. So I've loads of those because I shot like all my family's holidays, and then we shot like a lot of stuff around the house at Christmas. You know, so I have a lot of hours there, and we also shot lots of films when I was younger with my family in terms of, you know, a Scream film we shot, you know, because Scream was the big film at the time, you know, haunted house films.
Yeah.
A film about our dog. I remember I put our camera in like a wheelbarrow, so it was like our dog's point of view. So, you know, I've always been making films, so it's less a drive than just habit, you know what I mean? So you know, I think if you can get yourself into that habit, it's easy, do you know what I mean? Because it just becomes, you know, habit to do it then, you know, it doesn't.
And that concludes this episode of The Recluse's Cookbook. Thank you for listening.